Oh, salam wa durud. A very warm welcome to everyone who's joining our monthly IIEA international webinar. My name is Hassan Hakimian. It's a distinct honor and pleasure to preside over and moderate the session tonight. Well, I say tonight because it's just gone past 7 p.m. in Doha, where I am located, and our colleagues, presenters, joining us from Iran. It's half an hour later. I realize our audience join us from around the world from different time zones. Nevertheless, it's our pleasure to be connected again as part of these regular monthly seminars. Today's topic is an interesting one, an intriguing one. Interest in Iran's foreign policy has been prominent since the early days of the revolution in 1979, and now with the benefit of 4.5 decades, or nearly 4.5 decades after the revolution, hopefully we have sufficient evidence to look back and examine the early ideals of the revolution, which focus in as far as Iran's foreign relations was concerned on distinct ideal of reaching or achieving economic independence. Of course, Iran's foreign policy has evolved over the decades. In early years, it was neither east nor west, na sharqi na gharbi. That was dominant, the dominant theme. And in fact, the IIEA a few months ago had a session devoted to this slogan defining or delineating Iran's foreign policy, and we had a keynote speaker who addressed that topic. Now tonight, we have an opportunity in the presence of two distinct Iranian economists, both of whom are in Iran, to address aspects of the economic ramifications of Iran's foreign policy. Of course, as you know, International Iranian Economic Association is a professional, independent and inclusive non-political research forum and association focused on covering aspects that relate to Iran's economy. So this is why we engage with Iran's foreign policy from an economic perspective. With that short introduction, I know everyone joins us to hear what our distinct speakers have to say. So let me very quickly explain the order of the session today. As I mentioned, we have only two speakers, which gives us hopefully more time for interaction and discussions with the floor. I will be giving brief introductions. Our first speaker would be Professor Zahra Karimi from University of Mazandaran, and she will be followed by Professor Karim Eslamloueyan, who is from Shiraz University. The title of the presentations is on the screen, so I won't read them. After their presentation, I would then invite my colleague and friend, Professor Masoud Karshanas, who's volunteered to provide short comments by way of discussion. And so each speaker would take up to 20 minutes, and Professor Karshanas will be given around 7 or 8 minutes. So without further ado, let me very briefly introduce Professor Karimi. Professor Zahra Karimi is an associate professor at University of Mazandaran. Her areas of expertise include development economics, institutional economics, and the labor market. Professor Karimi has taught in the UK at the University of Sunderland and in Taiwan at the National Chung Hsing University. She's a member of Economists for Full Employment, Global Labor University, and the Gender and Macroeconomics Working Group. She has a long list of publications. I will spare you the list and give her the floor so that she can enlighten us with her paper. Now, since we face difficulties with bandwidth on Zoom, I'm going to assist by uploading, or rather sharing the screen on her behalf. I hope this is now visible. Professor Karimi, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So we're ready to go. And please, you indicate when I have to turn the page over to the next slide. The floor is yours, and you have 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm really very glad to be with you. Thank you for inviting me. As you can see, the title of my presentation is The Impact of Iran's Orientation Towards the East on its Economic Performance. Yeah, please. Next one. As you can see, the structure of my presentation is, at first, I will explain about the theoretical basis of my lecture, economic development and foreign relations, and then I will go to Islamic Republic of Iran's foreign policy, and I will explain the causes of tensions between Iran and the West, changes in Iran major trade partners during the past 2-3 decades, and the consequences of sanctions and the effects, especially on the labor market. That is my expertise. And I have also a special field survey for this research, and I will explain the result of this field survey regarding the barriers to technology transfer. Okay, next, please. There is a noise here. Yeah, okay. I think I can go very quickly from the theoretical part because we have only 20 minutes, but nowadays it's very clear that trade is very important for economic growth, as this technological gap between advanced countries and developing countries means that we as Iranian can use this technological gap with trade. And when we have tension in relation with the West and advanced countries, we cannot use this technology potential, and there is harsh punishment for trade with hostile countries. If we do not have a friendly relation with advanced country, we cannot use trade as a tool for transferring technological advancement to our country. And now there are a lot of discussions in the past decades that all countries needs economic diplomacy for facilitating economic cooperation. And foreign policies is like a complementary tools for domestic development plans. So Iran must, like other countries, must analyze the costs and benefits of foreign policies, and can have some evaluation about the results of these hostilities with advanced countries. Okay. Next one, please.
There's usually a slight delay before I turn the page over and when it shows. So I think we have to factor that in. Can you see the next slide?
Yes, thank you. Before Islamic Revolution, we had very good relation with advanced country. US and Germany was the most important trade partners. But after the Islamic Revolution, foreign policy of the country changed considerably. There are a few rules that is dominant in Iran foreign relation. One is the preference of having connection with the nations, not the governments, and have some relationship with political faction. And the other is fighting against Israel and defending Palestinians. And from the beginning, hostility with the United States and with West as its allies. And it is very important that this foreign policy is not consistent with Iranian economics, as we are oil exporting countries and the main customers of Iran oil is advanced countries. So this inconsistency had a very dire impact on Iran economic performance. Yeah, please. as I told you, there have been important tensions between Iran and United States, but it was not a situation during the past 45 years. We had more friendly relations with the West during pragmatist and reformist governments of Rafsanjani and Khatami, but especially since Ahmadinejad presidency, foreign policy of Iran became aggressive against the West, especially during 2005, 2013. And after discussion or some concern in the West regarding Iran nuclear program, new tension began. The first step of negotiation started during Khatami presidency, but hard international sanctions against Iran began during Ahmadinejad presidency, long discussion, negotiation, but finally hard sanctions started in 2012. And because of these sanctions, in the past 2 decades, before this hard sanction also it started, but after the sanction, it became very important to have more trade relation with the Eastern countries, especially China, because it is a long debate in Iran. Hardliners believe and insist that China, India, and Russia will be the major world powers in the near future. So it is very wise to be just in the side of the successful countries, and they started to increase their economic and political relation with these Eastern countries. And they believe that this collaboration with Eastern countries, as I told you, China, India, and Russia, will guarantee Iran's national interest. So the trade with United States, Canada, and European countries declined considerably, and hard sanctions also moved Iran much rapider towards the east. If you look at these figures here, you can see that in 2001, and that is just before Ahmadinejad presidency, we had good relation with the Eastern, Western countries. You can see here, Germany had 10% of Iran trade, and France 6.1, Japan 6.7. But after the sanctions, this picture changed, and as you can see, Germany in 2022, the share of Germany is 3.4%, and France less than 1%, Italy 0%, Japan about 1.1%, but China got the very big share of Iranian imports from 5% in 2001 to more than 26% in 2022. Regarding the most important trade partner of Iran, UAE, United Arab Emirates, it is important to explain that this small country is a window for Iranian trade with the West, especially. As we have the difficulty to direct trade with advanced country, we use especially Dubai as a indirect trade route to Iran. So you can see in 2022, Emirate and especially Dubai is the most important trade partner, and with more than 30%, and China is the second country. But as you can see, European countries is losing the share to China, especially. Next one, please. And if you look at non-oil exports of Iran, you can see again that the United Arab Emirates have a very big share, but China, as you can see here, got a very, very big share of Iranian export, non-oil export, the same as oil. And you can see India also not much, but Russia, you can see that before these recent years had no share, especially in Iranian export, and nowadays is a little more than 1%. So the most important country is China, really. Yeah. It is obvious that these sanctions since the beginning of last decade reduced Iran oil revenues, and we faced the shortage of hard currencies, and also was a severe restriction against Iranian banking system. We do not have access to international banking transactions regime. And as Iranian government cannot control its expenditure, rising budget deficit is a very big challenge in the past decade. And we have the problem of stagflation in recent years. And as we have the problem of shortage of hard currency, the manufacturing sector is facing with the problem of old and outdated machinery and equipment, and the economy suffers from decreasing production and labor productivity, especially. And one of the most important consequences of these sanctions is declining investment. As you can see, it is really very steep negative trend of investment that have pressure on current situation and create negative perspective for Iranian economy in the near future.
Apologies for interrupting. What are the units here? Are they reals or dollars or?
It's real, but in
Reals.
constant prices, as you can see. If it was current price, it can go up, but in constant prices, it is going down.
Sure, apologies. Thank you. Shall I turn over?
Yeah, please. I wanted to show you what is the impact of these tensions in Iran relationship with the advanced country on labor market. As I told you, we had the problem of stagflation, and annual GDP growth during 2011 to 2021 was near zero. So we say in Iran that 2010s is really the last decade for Iranian economy. So there is no real growth, economic growth. And we have in other side, employment growth about 1.5%. And it means that employment growth is achieved by the cost of negative growth of labor productivity, because as many factory reduce the production and fire the workforce, many skilled workers lost their job and moved to informal, low value added jobs. Share of self-employment in Iran increased from 32% to more than 36%. And nowadays we have more than 5 million taxi drivers, self-employed workers who works with internet taxi companies that you have like Uber in Europe. But we have very big internet taxi companies that employ a lot of educated youth, men and women, and the number of women in these internet taxis also is increasing. As you can see here, employment change and productivity change. Productivity is in this red line, and you can see from 2019 it is steeply declined. Employment, because 2019 is the period of COVID, and you know that many economic units was closed or declined the production of many manufacturing companies and so on. And so you can see the employment decline and then started to increase, but the productivity declined very rapidly. Yeah. And the other indicator of the situation in the labor market is the falling real wage. I can explain you by the next graphs. Would you please go? Yeah. As you can see, during this recent decade, 2011 to 2021, you can see by the red line, nominal wage is increased, especially after the US withdrawal of JCPOA. We had very high inflation. And as you can see, the wage is increasing very rapidly. But if you look at the real wages in the blue line, you can see clearly that real wage was declining as inflation rate was much higher than the rise of minimum wage. So perhaps one of the most important consequences of tension between Iran and the West is related to technology transfer, as importing Western advanced machinery and equipment is very difficult. The companies have to pay a lot of money to buy something from Europe or Canada or Japan and then move to other third parties countries and bring to Iran, and it is time consuming and very, very expensive. So many factories use their old machinery and equipment, and they try to import Chinese production to substitute for Western ones, but it is not easy. It is not possible for all firms, especially big Chinese companies also do not want to have direct collaboration with Iran, as they use Western components in their production. So we have only contact and trade relationship with a small and medium-sized Chinese company. So there is very, very limited opportunity for know-how transfer and technology transfer to Iran. For looking at this barrier, I started a field survey, and with the help of Iran Chamber of Commerce and Iran Entrepreneurship Association, I completed a questionnaire. I used the information of 128 firms that used imported machinery and equipment, but some of them was not some of the questionnaire was not acceptable. At last, it was 110 acceptable completed questionnaire from small, medium-sized, and big private firms. The percentage of big private firms is very high, 45%, because I use the help of Iran Chamber of Commerce that have a big share of these big private firms. If we want to see what is the consequences of these sanctions or the consequences of this hostility with the West on performance of Iranian private firms, we can see here that when I, just a few months ago, I completed this questionnaire, more than 65% of firms with more than 20 years of experience use very much Western machinery. And for the firms with less than 20 years of experience, also the picture more or less is the same. 48% of these firms also use Western machinery. And the difference between these two groups is insignificant. And so it means that after more than 10 years of these hard sanctions, Iranian firms at present is dependent on this Western machinery and equipment until now. And if we look at big firms and smaller firms with more than 100 workers, less than 100 workers, the picture is more or less the same. Big firms, 64% of big firms with more than 100 workers use very much Western machinery, and for small and medium-sized firms with less than 100 workers, it is about 60%. If the can we go down or not? Yeah, here you can see a little difference. Only 50% of these big firms now do not use Western machinery, and 15% versus 11% of small and medium-sized firms could substitute Chinese, especially Chinese products for Western machinery, and the difference is not significant. Yeah. But regarding substitution of Chinese machinery, I ask another question. Could you substitute Chinese machinery for Western ones? Very much, moderate, few and very few, or not at all? As you can see, only 12% of big firms and 40% of small firms answered very much, and the difference is not significant. But only 10% and 60% of these firms announced that they do not use Western machinery, and they couldn't substitute Chinese machinery. But okay, I finished my time. Okay. If you can go to moderate substitution of Chinese machines and equipment, you can see big firms have more possibility to substitute Chinese machinery and equipment compared to smaller firms. Why? Because, for example, car manufacturing companies in Iran have very close collaboration with Chinese firm, and at present they import components of car and have this assembly line in Iran. So we have this moderate use of machinery, Chinese machinery, much higher in very big firms compared to a smaller one. So we have a mixed picture of success and failure of substitution of Chinese machinery for Western machinery and equipment in Iran in recent years. Okay. So I don't want to repeat the discussion, but I insist that looking towards the East, especially having trade relation with China, have very high cost for Iranian economy, that is high inflation, declining growth, and falling, I cannot see the last line, must be falling productivity, is it?
Yes, falling productivity.
Yeah, and the last one, please go. I can explain here by this field survey. We can see that many Iranian firms, more than half of the Iranian firms, could not substitute Chinese products for Western advanced machinery and equipment. It is very important because perhaps without these precise interviews and survey, we can suggest that Chinese machinery are everywhere, but it is not true. Many Iranian firms could not be successful to substitute Chinese products, especially internet companies and chemical companies have a special importing companies that must come from advanced European countries, Canada and Japan. So if we want to get out of this stagflation, the precondition of this change is lifting sanctions. So sanction is a very important barriers for economic development of Iran. And for this change, we need economic and political relation, both with the East and the West, to guarantee Iranian best interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping within time. Much appreciated. You've highlighted a number of pertinent themes, the costs and benefits of different foreign policy trajectories. You've also highlighted the vexed position that the UAE occupies within Iran's foreign trade or imports distribution, and that raises interesting questions as to whether we treat the UAE as East or West, given the indirect role it plays in diverting what must be considered to be Western products into the Iranian market. And last but not least, you've also touched on whether the gravitation towards the East is part of a necessity for Iran, given the harsh economic sanctions imposed by the West in the face of hostility adopted towards Western countries since the revolution, or whether this is part of an overarching or discrete foreign policy adopted by the regime. Well, these are some of the themes that are also addressed in the next presentation by Professor Eslamloueyan, and I'm sure we will come to discuss these during the Q&A. It goes without saying that if you have questions, please do take opportunity to formulate short questions in the Q&A section, please, which appears at the bottom of the screen. So with your permission, let me now do a similar short introduction to our next speaker. Professor Karim Eslamloueyan is a professor of economics at Shiraz University in Iran. He received his PhD in economics from Ottawa University in Canada. His research interests include macroeconomics, international economics, and Islamic economics. He has mainly focused on, in terms of research, on energy-rich countries and the Middle East and Asian economies. Professor Eslamloueyan has a large number of publications, which include 70 research articles in peer-reviewed journals, a book on advanced macroeconomics, 17 book chapters, and of course, various conference papers. So Professor Eslamloueyan, the floor is yours, and you will be presenting your slides, so that should be relatively straightforward. Over to you. You have 20 minutes. I think you're muted.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the IIEA for arranging this meeting, and I am grateful for the chance to participate. Do you have my slides on your screen?
Yes, absolutely fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah, we can see them.
It's okay now?
Yeah.
Maybe if you press if you press F5, it will make it big.
Presentation mode.
F5?
Yeah, on your laptop or computer, if you press F5.
Yeah, I press F5.
I think this is a PDF. Is this a PDF or is it?
No, it's a PowerPoint.
Okay, PowerPoint then.
Don't worry about it. It's okay.
I have the PDF file as well. If you want, I can share that.
We should be able to show this in slides, design, transition, slideshow. At the top, do you see on the command line, do you see slideshow? After animations, slideshow? right at the center at the top.
At the center. Your screen sharing.
At the top, the command line, you have File, Home, Insert, Draw. If you carry on to the middle, it says Slideshow.
No, I don't see that.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
If you want, I can share the PDF file.
Let's
This
do
is
that.
okay?
Yeah, and then view the full page, yeah.
Now, is it? Can you see the PDF file?
No, it's still showing the PowerPoint. Actually, let's not worry. Let's carry on with the PowerPoint. It's all right. We can see the slides.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. The title of my paper is The Effect of Sanction, Complexity, and World Trade Uncertainty on Trade Relationship between Iran and South and East Asian countries. There is no doubt that Iran has always played an important role in ancient, time when there was ancient Silk Road. And Iran has great potential to connect the East and the West through the new Silk Road. And Iran is very rich, oil-rich country. Energy is significant constraint for future economic development for China and other South and East Asian countries. So Iran can also play an important role here and can provide enough maybe energy to these Eastern countries, East Asian countries. I skip from the introduction. The paper has the introduction. After the introduction, I would go through Iran's trade ties with West and the East, and then I present the model, the empirical result, and the conclusion. Excuse me. This figure shows the Iran's trade percentage of GDP. It's a kind of degree of Iran's openness. As the figure shows, the change in Iran's degree of openness, it shows that after the first global oil shock of 1973, the share of trade in Iran's economy increased to about 76% in 1975. Because Iran was a significant oil exporter, this shock increased the oil price from $3 per barrel to about $10. So it dramatically raised the Iran's export due to the crucial role of oil revenue in its total trade with the world. Since 1975, the degree of trade openness dropped to 45% in 1979. Before the revolution. After the victory of Islamic Revolution in 1979 and the start of the Iran-Iraq War, the degree of trade openness reached 14% in 1986. Since then, trade share has an increasing trend. Its highest level was 58% in 2018. And after the withdrawal of the US from the nuclear deal with Iran in 1918, and the outbreak of the COVID-19, the share of Iran's trade in GDP reached as low as 43%. And the next slide shows the share of Iran's trade with the West. According to IMF, Iran's trade with the West in 1966 was about 50% of its total trade. As this figure shows, the share of West in Iran's total trade reached less than 10% in 2021. It shows a dramatic shift in Iran's trade with the West. Okay. Figure 3 shows the ratio of Iran's trade with South and East Asia. As the figure shows, the share of South and East Asia in Iran's total trade has had an upward trend in the last 40 years. So it was about 20%, the highest was 60%, and now it is about more than 40%. The share of the West and the East in Iran's trade with the world is depicted in this figure. We can compare the East and West share in Iran's trade with the world. The blue line shows the share of West in Iran's total trade. As it indicated, it reached to less than 10% in 2021. But the red line shows that it has an upward trend the share of South and East Asian region in Iran's trade is very high. It even reached more than 60% in about like 2012. So all this shows that this one, there are some evidence that the share of emerging and developing Asian countries in the trade of the Middle East and Central Asia countries has also increased over time. I want to say that it is not confined to Iran. This share has always been increasing in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and I will show that. So it means that the share of East in world trade has increased, and the East policy is not necessarily confined to Iran. This shows that, excuse me, the red line shows that emerging and developing Asian share export of Middle East and Central Asia to emerging and developing Asian countries. The red line and the orange line shows the export of Middle East and Central Asia to Europe. So we see the gap here, and also this shows the imports of Middle East and Central Asian countries from advanced economies. The blue line and the red line show the imports of Middle East and Central Asia from emerging and developing Asian countries. And now at 2020, it's very close to each other. There are several questions regarding the Iran-Asia trade relationship that we addressed in these papers. So the questions are, what is the role of harsh economic sanction imposed on Iran in shaping Iran-Asia trade ties? Does world trade uncertainty contribute to Iran's trade look toward the East? Does improving Iran's economic complexity index affect Asian trade with Iran? How did the COVID-19 crisis shape Iran's trade with the South and East Asia? So after reviewing the literature, we argued that there is a lack in the literature. There is no research on why Iran's trade has shifted from West to the East, and there is no model to quantify this. So we estimate an econometric model to quantify the effect of sanctions, world trade uncertainty, economic complexity, and economic growth in East and South Asia and Iran-Asia trade ties. The model allows us also to examine the effect of COVID-19 crisis on Iran-Asia trade ties. So I go directly to the model. We examined or test 4 different hypotheses. Hypothesis 1 is that economic sanction increases the share of Asia in Iran's trade, or economic sanction reduces the trade share of West in Iran's total trade. It is evident that it has affected this, but how much? So we want to estimate the coefficient and quantify those effects. Hypothesis 2 is world trade uncertainty changes the direction of Iran's trade share with the East. Hypothesis 3 is Iran's economic complexity affects its trade share with the East. And finally, economic growth in South and East Asia affects Iran's trade ties. So to model this, the left side is our dependent variable, which is Asian share of Iran's total trade, and our explanatory variables include Iran's GDP, Asian GDP, economic sanctions, Iran's economic complexity index, and world trade uncertainty, and also COVID-19 crisis. So we use ARDL model, autoregressive distributed lag model, to study the effect of these variables on Iran's Asian shares in Iran total trade. So this allows us to also estimate the long run and short run, long run equilibrium, and also short run relationship. So this is the specification of model. I will not go through it. It is available in this slide. In our this error correction model, and then the data and methodology. Our sample covers 15 Iran's main partners in East and South Asia, including China, India, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia.
Sorry, Professor Eslamloueyan, for interruption. Your slides are stuck on figure 2. They're not moving.
Figure 2.
Okay, now it's better. Yeah,
They
start. Yeah, no, yeah. Okay, that's better.
Okay, sorry for that. So our sample covers 15 Iran's main partners in East and South Asia, including China, India, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Afghanistan, Macau, and Pakistan. And we estimate the model for the period 1995 to 2020. Actually, we didn't have data before 1995 for like complexity index for Iran. This is why we restricted ourselves to this period. And we did the required test for our ARDL model. We had a combination of I0 and I1 variables in our model. So we used bound testing proposed by Professor Besaran, Shin, and Smith, and used the different information criterion to determine the lag order. And we make sure that there is no serial correlation, no heteroscedasticity. We did all these tests, and also the stability test, like cumulative sum and cumulative sum of scores, and the model passed the stability test. And the result shows that this is the long-run estimation of the ARDL model. The parameters are mainly statistically significant, except one which is statistically significant as 10%. Most of them are less than like 6, 22%, and 4%. So the result shows that, I mean, the main result, that the long-run model shows as the coefficient of economic sanction and statistically significant, like it implies that economic sanction one of primary determinant of Asia's share in Iran's trade with the world. And also we
have trouble hearing you. The voice is cracking up now. Can you hear us? Professor Eslamloueyan, we cannot see your screen and we cannot hear you. I can see you're trying to connect to audio. I hope you succeed. Apologies for the disruption. Let's hope he can join us.
Iran's trade with the West increases compared to the East or South and East Asia. And also we find that the growth in GDP growth in Asia has a significant, statistically significant positive effect on the share of Asia in Iran's trade, as one would expect from the theories. And COVID-19 also has a substantial short-run negative effect on Iran's share in Asia's share in Iran's total trade. Conclusion. So,
Professor Eslamloueyan, sorry, apologies.
Yes.
We had trouble hearing your results when you started presenting the results of your regression. We lost both your screen, the slides, and also your voice. You might just want, before going to conclusion, to re-present your findings briefly. We heard a bit about COVID, but about complexity and about the rest, you might just want to sum up.
Okay, do you have this slide now?
No, we don't have the slides. No, we just have your voice.
So I can share the PDF file if you wish.
Well, it's worth trying. Try, and you're well within time. Don't worry about time. It's
Okay.
worth trying. I suppose
Okay.
one can say connectivity problems are a reflection of Iran's foreign policy. We are experiencing what we are preaching.
Okay. Let me see. Do you see the PDF file now?
Not now.
Not now.
You need
So
to
maybe,
press share screen. You know the green button at the bottom, share
yes, yes.
screen.
I press. Yes, yes. It is. It's on.
Well, if it's not coming, don't worry. You can talk through your slides. We will follow you.
I'm afraid if I leave the meeting and come back,
No, it's come. It's come now.
it's okay now.
Yeah.
Let me share the. Do you see now the PDF file?
Yes, it's slide number 17. Hypothesis 1, hypothesis 2. Okay, just we can, you know.
Okay. Uh, slide 19. 70. Let me. You see the table 3?
Table A1.
No, why? No, I don't know.
Is it someone else is sharing? I think screen. Mohammed, is it? Are you sharing?
I am sharing. Which
Yeah,
table
but
you mean?
no. This is a different version. Professor Eslamloueyan has a different version. It's an
Okay,
updated one.
I am the older version. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
It's okay if it is.
Why don't? Can I suggest, because I've seen the old version? Can you, Mohammed, go to the findings?
Yes.
Go down number. Yes, this is what.
Cannot
Yeah, just
see
before conclusion. Before conclusion.
before conclusion.
That's
This
where
one?
we lost you. Okay, if you can summarize this slide, we will be with you.
Before conclusion are the results.
Exactly.
So the results of long-run model shows that the coefficient of economic sanction is positive and is statistically significant, and it means that economic sanctions is one of the primary determinants of Asia's share in Iran trade with the world. Our results also indicate that an improvement in Iran's specific complexity index reduces Asia's share in Iran's total trade. Because we noticed that the economic complexity index in 2021 for China was ranked 25 and Iran is ranked 67. So since the complexity index of main Iran's trade partners in Asia, such as Japan, South Korea, China, and India, is much higher than Iran, an increase in Iran's complexity index leads to higher trade with other parts of the world. So it means that Iran's knowledge-based products have more opportunity to be traded in less advanced economies. And this results in a lower share of Iran's Asian countries trade with Iran. And also the result uh, shows that, I lost a slide. Next slide. Uh, World trade uncertainty increases Iran's relative trade with Asia. So it means that in an uncertain trade war, the relative risk of Iran's trade with the West increases compared to the East or South and East Asia. And also the result shows that South and East Asian GDP growth rate has a statistically positive effect on the share of Asia in Iran's trade. And the COVID-19 crisis has a substantial short-run impact, negative impact, on Asia's share in Iran's total trade. So the main conclusions are like, we know that different economic and political factors affect Iran move toward Asian countries. Among these factors are economic sanctions imposed on Iran by the West and increasing trade uncertainty in the global economy. We also conclude that apart from sanctions and world trade uncertainty, economic complexity is another determinant of trade relationship between Iran and the leading Asian countries. Finally, by comparing the increase increasing trade connection between Iran and the East with the decreasing trade relationship with the West, we conclude that Iran's move toward the East is not necessarily a strategic choice. The hostility between Iran and the West and the harsh economic and non-economic sanctions imposed on Iran by the West have left no choice for Iran but to boost its economic relationship with the East. However, they are not the only driving forces contributing to the rise of Iran-East trade ties. For example, you notice that, for example, there is a change in global trade movement toward Asia, and the evidence shows that many Middle Eastern countries with no history of conflict with the West have also increased their trade with the East. For example, the share of trade between the Middle East and North Africa, African countries such as Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Egypt with Asia has also risen during the last 30 years. So we conclude that Iran's West conflict embedded in economic sanctions only speeds up Iran's movement toward the East, but is not the only driving force for Iran's Look East policy. Sorry for the interruption and also the problem with the slide. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And for the opportunity to present my paper in this meeting. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for persisting, and apologies everyone for the technical hitches we had. Every time we have webinars with Iran, especially if using prohibited platforms like Zoom, we experience difficulties as that we had tonight. Anyway, I think we got the gist of your presentation. Very interesting. You've highlighted a number of issues. Interesting that your results show the Look East policy is brought about by political imperatives, sanctions, but on the other hand, the greater the complexity of economies with which Iran trades, the lower its comparative advantage. Therefore, it is better off from an economic rationale point of view to engage with less sophisticated economies and so on. So interesting and perhaps to some extent contradictory results. Masoud Karshanas, are you with us? I'm going to give you the floor to discuss 7 or 8 minutes, the main points for both papers, and then we'll open up to Q&A. I can see that some questions have already been posted on the Q&A. Please feel free to post brief questions there. I'll do my best to try and cover as many as possible. Over to you, Masoud.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Hassan, for sending me the PowerPoints and asking to give me these 7-8 minutes. Well, I enjoyed listening to both presentations. The issue of sanctions is very important for the Iranian economy. Both papers agree on the severity, the impact of sanctions on the economy. There have been other studies that corroborate this devastating impact, and some of those works have been presented at the IIEA webinars over the past 2 years. The two presentations focus on the specific mechanisms of the impact of sanctions, that is trade, investment, productivity, and employment, which is welcome. I will not recount the alarming figures on declining per capita GDP and productivity and increasing precarity mentioned by Dr. Karimi, which are all true, but I want to add an additional alarming statistic to this list. My own work shows that between 2010 and 2022, real food consumption per household in Iran has fallen by 50%, and per capita food consumption by 41%. These are alarming figures and show that the brunt of the sanctions regime is taken by the masses, the youth, and women, both as homemakers and aspiring labor force participants. As economists, it's incumbent upon us to highlight these facts so that politicians can make better informed decisions. But also as economists, to make any rational intervention in the decision-making processes, we need clarity on at least two issues. Firstly, as a nation, Iran needs to clearly spell out its aims and objectives for the country itself and in the international arena. These objectives could be political, cultural, or economic. I say as a nation because otherwise these objectives can change with the change of governments and will not be sustainable. Secondly, there should be discussion and debate on the strategies and tactics that the country should follow to attain these objectives. Economists can play a role at this stage by highlighting the ways and means to attain the above goals by rational and strategic decision-making. The question is, what are the differences in objectives and strategies between Iran and countries like Turkey, India, Brazil, Indonesia, and other countries that are not sanctioned? Is it due to the differences in objectives or differences in strategies? I think it is more because of the differences in strategies rather than objectives. And in this, I differ a little bit with Dr. Karimi's presentation. The example of China is a good one. When China in the late 20th century embarked upon its economic reforms, its so-called opening up reforms, it did not necessarily change its objectives. But the Communist Party in China came to the conclusion that the strategic decision-making, the strategic decision of opening up to the West was necessary for attaining its long-term objectives. And we can see the fruits of that strategic decision in the international arena a few decades later. Now, just a few specific comments on the two papers. I really liked the microeconomic approach of Dr. Zahra's paper. By conducting interviews with businessmen, and I hope she pursues this line of research to inquire about other important aspects of the impact of the sanctions on investment for business enterprises. For example, who are the suppliers of the machinery used by these enterprises? Do they have access to direct communication and trade with their suppliers? Or are these procured by traders? And other issues related to the quality of the machinery obtained from various sources. This also takes us to the important question of the impact of monopolization of trade by a few big importing merchants and its impact on the quality of imports. The low quality of imported machinery from China may not be due to the reluctance of the Chinese enterprises to export good quality machinery to Iran, but rather the capture of the import market by monopoly traders who need not care about quality of their products due to lack of competition. Another point that relates to both papers is that I would have liked to see a more disaggregated treatment of Iran's trade, particularly its non-oil exports. As to the specific question on the second paper, I will not go into the econometric issues so much as Hashem, S.C., Kamir, and others are more qualified to comment on these aspects. One comment that I would make on the modeling issue is that I think gravity models of trade may be more informative on the transaction costs of trade, including sanctions. And they would also focus our attention to trade with neighboring countries, which could be very important for Iranian exporters as their first steps in preparing or penetrating the world market. On the variables used in the regression model, I have great reservations about the Harvard's so-called complexity variable. That index is really all over the place. For example, according to the Harvard index, Saudi Arabian economy is more knowledge intensive than India and 3 to 4 times more knowledge intensive than Iran. If you pay attention to the way this index is measured, you can see the reason for these anomalies clearly. as Saudi Arabia exports its oil to very knowledge-intensive economies such as knowledge-intensive countries such as China and Western countries, index becomes high. So one should really be careful about using these international indexes. Again, I would go back to the important issue of the composition of trade that needs more attention in this paper, particularly if Dr. Karim is interested in issues of complexity of trade. And finally, a point about both papers, I suggest they also look at the lack of foreign direct investment in manufacturing industry and lack of integration of the Iranian producers in the international commodity chains that at present are defining conditions for participation in international division of labor and technological progress. Okay, thank you. I think my 7-8 minutes is over, and
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. Great timing. Thank you very much to
okay.
both our speakers and also Masood for very thoughtful discussion points. Maybe it's appropriate for me to invite Dr. Karimi and Professor Eslamloueyan if they wish to make brief responses to Masood's points, or do you prefer if you go straight over to some of the questions that have been fielded? The floor is yours if you want to respond. Professor Karimi?
Yes, thank you very much for your comments. And it was a great pleasure for me to see Dr. Karshanas. I use his valuable book, Oil and State, something like this in Iran. It was really very, very helpful in my classes. Okay, you regarding the interviews and the questionnaire, I had no time to explain about different questions and the impact of these harsh sanctions on the quality of imported goods and the time and the money that they spend, why they have to trade with what they say, many traders in between, and also the impact on the quality of production and their expectation for investment. Is it necessary to have access to Western commodity for expanding their activities? We had a lot of different questions to have better idea about the different, what they say, dimensions of impacts of sanctions of private firms. One of the participants asked me about the impact of women in Iran. It is not directly related to my lecture, but women in Iran, especially in the labor market, have mixed picture. There are rising number of Iranian women with high education and very good skills. The number of skilled women in the labor market is increasing, but we have the problem of university educated women who cannot find the opportunity that they like in Iranian labor market. So we can see the struggle of women to be more active economically, politically, and socially in Iran. And as I am a university professor, I can see more women in academy, a lot of women students who are really concerned about the future, but they try their best to have positive impact on the country's future. Other question was about the.
Can I ask you, if you don't mind, if you have answers to Masood's comments at this stage? I will encourage both of you to address some of the questions that have appeared in the Q&A in due course. Is there something you want to further add to Masood's point, or if not, we'll come back to you to answer.
Yes, I answered some of the comments because he suggested that it is good the idea that as the firms, what is the impact of the sanction on the quality of the production? And I had this question in the questionnaire regarding the lack of FDI and lack of the presence of Iran in the global value chain. Yes, it is important. It was not in my question, but I have to look at this. And regarding the per capita consumption in Iran, yes, it is a really important subject. And I do know that since the mid of 2000s, before a few years before the sanction, this trend started in Iran. The per capita consumption started to decrease because the economy is not dynamic enough to produce enough goods. And it is interesting that the population growth rate is so low, and the government is interested to increase the population growth, but we cannot keep the per capita consumption at present as well.
I guess the critical question, if I may jump in here from today's or tonight's point of view, is to what extent the long list of Iran's economic challenges and problems can actually be attributed to Iran's foreign policy. So this is, I think, if you have any insight on that. You mentioned, for instance, Iran's growth record in the past 10 years, for which we have data, is almost negligible. Unemployment, likewise, limited women's participation, etc. But to disentangle to what extent these are attributable to the pursuit of foreign policy of a certain type by Iran, and to what extent these are anchored in internal matters like economic mismanagement or policies adopted. Do you have any insight on that?
I believe, I'm totally convinced that sanctions and hostilities and foreign relation is very, very important. I believe that lifting sanction is the precondition, the necessity for Iran's economic change, reform, and changing the trend. But it is not sufficient. You're right. We have a lot of problems inside Iran, domestic problem, like internal tension, you know, a lot of risks of changing policies and risky environment because of this hostility between factions. For example, just a few months ago, Chamber of Commerce have an election and had a new, director, but the government did not accept it. And there is a long war for eliminating the elected person and having a new ballot. So we have a lot of problem inside Iran. But I think if we can, many things in Iran, without shifting the sanctions, we cannot solve our problems.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to move over to Professor Eslamloueyan, but while I have you, Professor Karimi, because there's a question which is directly related to your methodology, which Masood, the field study, which Masood touched on. And let me take this opportunity to put this question to you. The question is, could you please elaborate on the line sampling method, notably the clustering and stratification used in your survey? How much confident are you? How confident are you that the conducted survey represents the population of manufacturing and perhaps services firm in Iran? Question mark.
Really, I cannot say that the result of this survey can be generalized for all sectors. Because I asked the Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneur Association to put this questionnaire on their website, and I have contact with Iran German Chamber of Commerce, Iran Sweden Chamber of Commerce. So because they were so active before the sanctions, and I asked them to help me to complete this questionnaire. I cannot say that I can generalize the result of this questionnaire to all Iranian firms, but we can get some more precise picture. It is not.
But you had a fairly impressive response rate. I mean, you wrote to 128 firms. If I'm not mistaken, 110 responded. That's pretty good response rate. Maybe what, 85, 80 something percent?
Yeah.
Not a bad outcome.
Yeah, because they some of the firms also did not mention the city that they are active in, and they didn't want to be completely known, you know. So it was not difficult to have their idea and their experience about the sanctions and their trade with the Western countries and Chinese companies.
Thank you very much. There's another question relating to your paper, but
excuse me, I had another question. It was written.
Yes, I'm going to come back to you. No. I'm trying to be equitable. I'm going to come back. You had a good run. I'm taking time. You had 8 minutes 52 seconds. I'm going to pause you there. I like my timekeeping, if you see what I mean. There is another question, as you said, waiting to be answered by you. If there's time, I'll come back to you. But before I go to Professor Eslamloueyan, may I take this opportunity to remind all attending tonight that the IIEA is now under new board management. And that is because we had elections in 2023, which means the new round for membership is now open. All members, everybody who wants to join from Iran, academics, scholars, and so on, can join for free of charge. Students, no matter where they are, can also join free of charge. We have put in the chat section the membership information. There's a link there. Please make sure that you click on it. If you are an academic scholar outside Iran, then there's a modest membership fee that can be paid using your credit or debit card online, and it's relatively easy. There's a form also to fill in for everyone, whether you are fee paying or not. And all the information is on that page, so please make sure you access that page because it's very important for IIEA to renew its membership base for the next 3 years. And by the way, membership will run through to 2026. So if I can encourage you to do that, that would be fantastic. Professor Eslamloueyan, now it's your turn if you wish to respond to some of the comments and points that were raised by Masoud Karshanas.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, meeting was disconnected for a few minutes. I didn't have the voice of Professor Karshanas for a few minutes. I just heard the last comment of Professor Karshanas. I appreciate that regarding the composition of trade is very important and its relationship with complexity index. I will go through it. Another point that Professor Karshanas raised, it was very important about the policy clarity and determine the objective by the government. Actually, we did another research on the effect of sanctions on poverty gap in Iran. It is under review now in a journal. So we find out that it is very important that the quality of institutional quality, which was measured by different indicators, such as political risk, investment profile, and other indicators, had important effect on offsetting the effect of sanctions on poverty in rural area and also in urban area. And it is related to this issue. In that paper also, we address the human capital and other issues as well. The complexity index, human capital, and trade is very important. We want to extend this paper and come up with maybe new results. I thank really Professor Karshanas for those comments. If there is, because I didn't have his voice, if there is anything left that I should answer, please now raise the question.
Masoud, do you want to highlight one or two other points you raised?
No, thank you. I think, just, the point, I don't know whether you heard about really this Harvard Complexity Index. Really, I wouldn't advise using it. It's not very informative. I don't know whether you heard my comments or not, but if you look
No,
at, I did. Well,
yeah,
basically, yeah.
Yes, please.
The way they measure it is how complex is your trading partner. For example, Saudi Arabia exports to, let's say, West and to China, its oil, and they are very complex, human capital intensive economies. Therefore, Saudi Arabia gets a very high rank in terms of human complexity. The trend in Iran is upward when oil exports to China increase. Saudi Arabia is above India, is close to China. I mean, for me, this is not really a very credible complexity index. I think you should focus on your own complexity index in terms of the composition of Iranian non-oil export. That was my comment, but thanks.
Yeah, excellent comments. Yes, sure. I will do that. Thank you.
If I can highlight, generally in these ranking tables worldwide, countries like Saudi Arabia and other GCC states do much better than Iran. Another example I can give is, for instance, in corruption perception index, because that includes, the number of papers closed during a year as an indication of limitations or restrictions on freedom of speech or freedom in general, human rights in general. If you're looking at a country where there are very few newspapers, your ability to close them is also limited by definition. But in a country like Iran, when during the events in 2009, in 1 year, tens of papers were closed. So, and of course, some of these papers reappear again under different licenses and under different titles. So that kind of simplified approach misses the process. For a country that has very little to show in terms of papers closed because papers running are official and non-independent, they do better in these tables. So anyhow, that's just a reminder of how careful we have to be with various indices, especially composite indices that are now very popular and applied in a wide range of fields, from environment to gender inequity, HDI, and so on and so forth. Right. Okay. There was another question about import substitution. The question was that Iran's been looking east in terms of manufacturing industry, especially for both, smaller and medium-sized firms. But when it comes to the larger firms, whether new or old, whether created in the last 20 years or long before that, they're still reliant, dependent, as you said, Professor Karimi, on Western machinery. Since Iran's manufacturing experience, industrialization experience in the 60s, 70s was characterized by import substitution, the question is whether sanctions and disengagement from the West has not in itself also encouraged import substitution. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, in the past years, after especially US withdrawal, as it was expected that the sanctions can be very long-lasting problem, there is some change for local production of some parts of, for manufacturing companies, for home appliances, but the inflation and the immigration of highly skilled workers have very hard blow to Iranian economy. At present, also, we have this smuggling home appliances in Iran free trade zones. So it seems that when we have sanctions, when we had the rise of hard currency value in Iran, it must help the domestic production. But after a few years, as we have very high inflation that have direct impact on the production cost, and also this problem of skilled workers, and also risky environment for investment, all of them create a lot of obstacles for increasing local production. In the past years, the home appliances manufacturing companies in Iran increased their products, but I think by this high inflation rate, we cannot compete with smuggled rival products as well again.
And that's, in a way, you might want to reflect on the point you made about UAE. Now it accounts for 30% of Iran's imports. And this is essentially, as you said, an re-export platform to Iran. Goods that Iran couldn't import directly are exported to the UAE, which then are diverted to Iranian markets. And this is a huge share, 30%.
Yeah. Because I had some direct interview with the managers of public and private firms, and they told me that when they want to import a special machinery, for example, one of the public firms told me that they wanted to import paper production machineries from Finland. And after US withdrawal, they could not continue the trade, and they tried to find some substitution from China. And after long discussion, they find a company that wanted to send second-hand machinery. They wanted to use sugar cane, what they say, residuals to produce paper by these new machineries from Finland. But they end up Chinese second-hand machinery, but after the while, they sent some expert to visit the machinery, and they saw that this machine worked with wood, not with sugarcane residuals. And then they started again to find a new machine. Finally, they find second-hand machinery that was working for more than 20 years in Spain, and they had to pay a lot of money, three times more than a new one. And the seller was willing to sell it just as ex-work, just beside the factory, and they did not want to think about the shipment, and the shipment must go to the third country, and when it is in the harbor, it must go to what they say, storage companies, and change the containers, change the containers. And then from the storage company go again to harbor with new containers, go to Iran. A lot of expenses and very low quality machineries. So,
okay, excellent. Let's stop there, because we are beaten by the clock. Time is coming up quickly to the end of the session, but we have a nice question as a way of rounding up from Professor Pesaron. Let me read that and then ask maybe Professor Eslamloueyan to address that, because I believe you have already answered this. Many inside Iran have argued that by redirecting trade and investment and better economic management, Iran can still achieve sustainable growth with one-digit inflation. What are the implications of your research for this viewpoint? Or is removal of sanctions a necessary condition for the renewal of Iranian economy? Professor Karimi, I think you were quite clear. You said it's necessary but not sufficient. So with your permission, I'm going to give the last word to Professor Eslamloueyan. I think in his presentation, there was an implicit answer to this, but if you'd like to round up by addressing this question, please, I'd be appreciated.
Okay, as I mentioned, we had no choice to go but to go toward the east, because the Western sanctions heavily has affected Iran's economy, poverty, and many other issues. But as I mentioned in the paper, we find out that many countries, like many Middle Eastern and Middle East and North African countries, and they have increased their trade with the East Asia. And now the first partner of Saudi Arabia is China. It is not the US. So it is very important. And it means there is a global trend maybe, or global trend, if not global trend, from Middle East to look toward East is very strong. And Iran is, so it is not confined to Iran, as I mentioned, but economic sanctions by the West has speeds of this movement toward the East. I feel that even if the sanctions, there was no sanctions, like there is no sanctions on Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, but still the trend shows that the share of East Asian uh, export and import and export to Middle East and import from Middle East has increased dramatically, and it is not confined to Iran. Regarding the input substitution strategy, as you mentioned, I think it is worth to study this issue and to study the effect of sanctions. And also I'm interested to see the quality of institutions regarding like trade patterns. So I will extend maybe my papers to address those issues as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much. This has been a very enriching and thoughtful session. It's my pleasure to bring it to an end, thanking both our speakers, Professor Zahra Karimi and Professor Karim Eslamloueyan, both from Iran, University of Mazandaran and University of Shiraz, respectively. And of course, our audience who have fielded good questions. Do remember to check IIEA's membership link, which appears on the chat page, and be reminded that we will continue to hold regular monthly webinars, normally on the second Wednesday of each month. And these are all recorded. The podcasts or the recordings for all sessions are available from IIEA's website. And they amount to a very rich, very interesting, very insightful repository of interactions and exchanges between top researchers and audiences we've had over the years. In the past, we have also organized international conferences, of which we had 6 before COVID. Over the years, with COVID, difficulties with visa and travel for our Iranian scholars and colleagues, and of course, growing costs of international travel. This is something that has now effectively been replaced by a much simpler way of connecting online on a regular basis. But this doesn't mean we have given up, and we are looking at possibilities of hopefully convening another international conference not in the too distant future. So keep up to date and keep up your support for us. This is a unique forum and a very professional one, and it has a long history. The first conference when we set up the IIEA goes back to 2012. So it's a happy story, and it connects many international economists, whether they are Iranians or not, as long as we are interested in studying in-depth study of Iran's economy. It's a fantastic way of staying in touch and enlightening each other. With that, many thanks, and hope to see you again. All the best. Good night or good day, wherever you are.